And we will go through two panels before we go to have a lunch. First one is introducing other mega projects, and the second panel is discussing the wider economic and other impacts of a project. We will sit on a stage like a panel again, and my asking for you is just again prepare the questions, because it's a very good opportunity to ask them. And I'm asking to the stage Mr. Konrad Bürgermeister from Brenner Base Tunnel. Please. Mr. Hans-Peter Wetsch, St. Gotthard Tunnel. Please. Mr. Felix Amberg Engineering. Please. And Ms. Baiba Rubessa from RB Rail. Thank you. Okay, my first question is easy, but it's tough too. What do you think? What do you think about crazy Estonians and Finns starting to dig? Don't tell Avanti amigos. Don't tell. Just tell how crazy it feels for you. Maybe we can start with you, Baiba.
This opinion is certainly a personal opinion. I think it's a fantastic idea. When we look at what Rail Baltica is to bring as an economic corridor to Northeast Europe, there's no question that a tunnel that would reduce traveling time between the two cities and the two countries by 30 minutes is an advantage. But when you travel through other parts of Europe and talk to decision makers in Central Europe and certainly in the Mediterranean, they usually don't pay attention to the north at all. But this one has captured imagination, and I think has captured focus on Northeast Europe. It will probably come about. I'm not so sure whether the time frame will be exactly the right one. I'm not sure what the technology will be. There we have much more experienced people behind me, and what it will ultimately cost. But I know that the Finns know how to dream big and realize on their dreams, and I think Estonians are also exquisite at finding innovation into anything that they touch.
No, thank you. Felix.
Oh, well, I mean, this is a rather, sorry to say, an odd question to somebody who has been doing underground infrastructure his entire professional time. So from that viewpoint, I don't think that this is crazy at all. But I would like to put that in maybe a little bit larger range. I mean, if you go to a city, then we are used to see that the city has three dimensions. We have the horizontal length and width, and we build skyscrapers. The third dimension to the sky is a normal dimension in which we think. But that we have a third dimension underground is not so common. But basically it is a third dimension, and it's nothing than logic to me that you start to think on how to make use of the underground space. And linking a city or two cities through an underground infrastructure, to me, just seems logic. You fly from Tallinn to Helsinki, you use the third dimension, you're used to that, no question. So why not go underground? It's a third dimension, just in the other direction. So from that viewpoint, no question. You don't get crazy. It's just logic to me.
Exactly, just an hour away.
Yep.
Hans-Peter.
No vision, no future. And I just remember the first idea from the Gotthard Base Tunnel was 1947, and the first project about 72. And then the real project 94, and realization 2016, just to have a scope.
Yeah, so developed a lot.
I would say that you need a vision, and like Felix Amberg told you, the vision is underground because the third dimension in the air is full and uncertain. And, I think that's the right way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
And the costs, I told you before also, construction cost is one. and operation and maintenance cost is the second one. And you don't have to fix too much to the construction. You have to fix more what's coming up.
Konrad.
Europe will have a chance in the future only if we are able to create a city-to-city connection. In 2050, we will be approximately 6% of the whole worldwide population. At that time, we will have only a chance if we are able to communicate on a different mode in a very fast way together, if we are able to work as a close country together. And secondly, if we have been able to develop innovations, and both issues could be forwarded through such a project.
Thank you. Before we go serious, tell me please honestly, how many times during your career it happened that instead of getting one tunnel, you get two? Because you are digging from both sides of a mountain, and when you are missing each other and you're getting two tunnels.
It's amazing. So to say that, it is amazing. That still seems to be the big questions. How can you meet underground? But I can reassure you that is not an issue anymore.
Not anymore.
For sure, that is not an issue.
So this is fixed.
No, don't worry. We will meet with a few centimeters deviation, but we will meet for sure.
At the Gotthard, the deviation was like this.
So this was a target, you know? Okay, thank you. So now we can...
That's no problem. That's no problem.
Oh, good, thank you. Baiba, you are representing Rail Baltica, and it's a big thing in Estonia. Not everyone is so happy with Rail Baltic. Now we see that Rail Baltic can give an openness of other perspectives, better connection to Finland and even up to Arctic. How do you see the connection with Rail Baltic, and is it so that Rail Baltic trains will be traveling inside the tunnels, or via separate trains there?
Well, first of all, I believe that Rail Baltica is certainly a precondition for Finest to be a project that will be truly accepted in the European Union if one seeks EU financing. So it behooves us to make sure that Rail Baltica is delivered in a proper fashion, quickly, efficiently, innovatively, and within reasonable budget as it's been earmarked. I would invite the most skeptical Estonians, or any other nationality for that matter, around Rail Baltica to understand that the infrastructure being built is really only a vehicle to develop a greater economic corridor. And I think the previous speakers vouched for that in very, very many ways. And if we are successful together in delivering Rail Baltica, we will be able to deliver the vision that Finland clearly has, and I assume in cooperation with Sweden and to some extent Norway, where I spent a lot of time to open the Arctic dimension for citizens, first of all, as well as for economic opportunity. Having said that, Rail Baltica, very much like some of the items mentioned in the Finest discussion, is also a question of how do we deliver the project sustainably, whether it's towards climate targets or towards environmental targets, or for that matter even socioeconomic targets. But I believe that the people who are skeptical about the project should look at it a little bit deeper, because if you dream about the twin cities, it will be enhanced 1,000 times more with Rail Baltica being completed.
Thank you. Felix, you have seen so many tunnels in your life. So if you imagine that tunnel, is it something special about it?
Before I give you an answer to that specific question, I think it's the right moment to let's say above all, this tunnel is feasible, though it is 100 kilometers long. I mean, there might have been questions 20, 25 years back. Is it feasible to build a tunnel of such a length? And this with the predecessor projects of 60 kilometers, let's say, though it is a one-third longer, so to say, it is a feasible tunnel. That from a technical viewpoint, the feasibility is not a question. But I think that is necessary to say. It's from a technical viewpoint, it's not in this sense visionary. The visionary, as you have been mentioning, somewhere else. But coming back to your question, I mean, the fact that it is a 100-kilometer long tunnel that has a lot of aspects which are to be investigated further in detail, so that the current state of technology can be implemented to that. That goes when it comes to operation, to safety, maintenance, operation. That is an issue, which certainly there is no predecessing. When it comes to construction, what is, let's say, the fascinating or the challenging thing is that you first have to, as you have seen in the movie, you have to spend certain time to, let's say, to be capable to start to build the tunnel. You have to build islands that you can actually build the tunnel in a reasonable construction time. And by saying that, it means that the logistics which go with that, every single screw and every cubic meter of excavated material, everything has to come on boat by boat and has to leave these islands by boat. So the logistic challenge is the big challenge. It is not the tunnel boring machine, it is not the concrete, it is not, I don't know, the lighting or thing like that, but the fact that we start to build intermediate accesses out in the sea. We need energy there, we need everything must be there before we can start to do the tunneling, and that is the big challenge for that project. That is unique, and that will be the major thing to dominate the logistics of these sites.
This is, of course, surprising to hear. What happened with an old-fashioned system when just we start digging here and everything comes out from a hole?
But well, the thing is that then it means that you have just 2 access points. And you have a certain, let's say, excavation rate by day, which means if you just have an attack from 2 sides, then you have to split these 100 kilometers in 2 lots of 50 kilometers, which means years, decades of excavation. So what you do, you build intermediate accesses so that you have more faces to attack in order to reduce the overall time to construct a tunnel. And time is money. So we need intermediate access for the construction, but well also for the operation, safety measures and things like that. So without any intermediate accesses, this would be a project not for our generation, maybe for the next 2 generations to come.
Thank you. Hans-Peter, such a long tunnel with its 2 extra access points, it generates a lot of different safety issues. Can you tell us about the biggest projects in a safety field what this tunnel building will face?
I think it's quite similar as in the construction phase. In the safety phase, when we started to decide the tunnel system, the idea from this emergency station after each around 20 kilometers, that was, I would say, the breakthrough for safety. And if you have now 2 emergency stations or 4, or as long as you have section where the train is able to reach a safe haven, you are on a safe way. The only risk is clear. As longer the tunnel is, as bigger your risk that you stand still once in the tunnel. And I think that was also the discussion we had in the group. In the next phase, you have to discuss about safety, how you evacuate people from this tunnel. Just to give you a number, we decided in the Gotthard tunnel, after 45 minutes, when the train has a problem, the intervention force has to be on place, and after 90 minutes, people has to evacuate in the free space. I would say here it will be a little bit longer, but it's maybe 2 hours, but it's not 4 or 5 hours. And this, because to keep people for hours in a tunnel, it could be a big problem. So you have to be sure that your concept is working in a certain time. And so the risk in a tunnel is less than in an open space. Open space you have, it happens much more weather things. The only thing is the train stands still in the tunnel. It has to be not on fire. Even nobody knows what happens, no lights, nothing anymore, no power. That's the realistic problem. The otherwise is you have to be sure that trains are checked before they enter in a tunnel. That is the major concept we have in Switzerland. We have a lot of checkpoints control. We check everything. We check the wheels. We check the weight. We check the chemical product on the freight trains. Everything before the trains enter in the tunnel. And preventive measure, that's important. Curative measure, that's just a problem. And self-rescue is a bigger problem. And if you need the fire brigades, you have crash.
Yeah.
That's
checking
like planes.
Yeah, it's like in aviation.
Yeah.
Well, checking passengers as well?
We check not now.
Don't check.
No, that's the only tunnel I know is Eurotunnel, because there's a little bit special between France and England. But I think if we start to check people in the tunnel, or like in the aviation, we lose a lot of passenger against the car.
It's not effective anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not attractive. And always, if you are on the airport, you need much more time. You need at least 2 hours. And if we start this to lose this advantage from the train,
of course,
the whole system lose.
Thank you, Konrad. This tunnel is special because it's uniting two countries. You have such experience uniting two countries. Is it special somehow? What's your experience?
I would like to, first of all, I would like to come back only for a second to the other question of Hans-Peter. I mean, talking about safety, which is always a quite dangerous issue. But we have to remember that in Europe, in the 27 European countries, we are accepting on a daily basis that for every 17,000 people, one person dies on a street accident. So that means railway traffic is at least 150 times safer as it is driving by car. This has to be taken into account. Coming back to the other questions, connecting projects between countries. In order to create Europe, we need such a projects. Otherwise, we will be never able to overcome different planning, construction, philosophies and cultures. And such a project connects people together during the realization phase. My personal experience with such a project, working together with two countries, are the following. First of all, this is a cultural challenge. That means you have to accept that different cultures, different languages exist. And don't make the error that we have to create one unique culture and one unique language. Please accept that there are different opinions, different, let's say, real cultures and philosophies, but create a certain autonomy for them. By creating a certain autonomy, they feel quite proud that they are able to promote a project, and then you are able, on a flexible way, having such a leadership personality like Baiba Rubesa is one of them, or Peter Teuscher was one of them. Such personalities are able then to handle that in a flexible way. And this is the only way how we can create a little bit of Europe.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
Well, I think that Konrad is speaking very much to the main challenges of any cross-border issue. We met with the people who created the Eurotunnel, who explained, that usually technically one finds solutions the easiest, no matter what they are. Engineers tend to be able to figure this out. The much harder part is about the nitty-gritty of how to manage the project, because legislation is different in both countries. Cultures are different in different countries. Over time, countries have different strengths and weaknesses in their economic development, all of these things. And then generally, Frenchmen are different from Englishmen. They, thank God, always have been and thank God always will be, much as we are as diverse in the Baltic countries. I think for Finnist, the good news is that culturally, generally, I've been led to believe, and I think it's probably true, that Finns and Estonians are much closer, certainly than Estonians and Latvians culturally to a large extent. Not that the cultures are that vastly different. I would just make one comment around the engineering, and that is that Rail Baltica design will come to an end in 2022. To be able to start constructing. So the question is, how can we bring the technical parameters closer together for the Finnes tunnel, not even knowing, I think in 2022, we won't be that far in project development for the tunnel as such, but we somehow need to be able to come closer together. I know we all agree on the point where this will happen physically, geographically, but I think that from a lot of design parameters, it is worth already having dialogue with those that know more about tunnels.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I guess you have to create some, let's say, communication levels. First of all, we had a similar problem 10 years ago with the Brenner Base Tunnel, and since we discussed it quite open-minded by saying, if we are constructing only 3 tubes which connects 2 countries together, we will never be able to create an added value. And this was the reason why we developed the idea of the platform. So I guess there are the 3 levels. First of all, the political level. In order to overcome this problem, an intergovernmental commission could help in the way that ministers, they are able to talk together for their political period of time, and then they are creating a kind of common language. On a second level, you have to create some working groups dealing with environmental issues, with co-financing issues, involving Europe, which is very important to understand also their commitment in terms of the 10 team DG Move and so on. Then certainly they have to talk about mobility in a general sense, modal shift and so on. Afterwards, technology. You have to imagine, since we are at the moment building a lot of underground structures on a worldwide level, there is a lot of innovation going on. And this kind of innovation have to be included in somehow, otherwise you are not able to promote it. And as a last issue, there are also certain, let's say, social impacts. They have to be carried out, socio-economical impacts. And using different working groups, they could be able to create a kind of very fine but very intensive network. And then for the pure technical issues, we needed 2 years in order to create, through a so-called guide design, a common understanding about the different rules in the 2 countries and the different codes. And probably such a, let's say, a platform could be also very useful to start already before you have the needs. Final comment. If you have a national project, then you can involve the authorities when it is needed. For a binational, for a multinational project, I am always saying you have to start at least 2 years in advance to involve, to communicate, and to prepare the authorities.
No, yes, please.
Though in Switzerland we have avoided that binational problems because with the Gotthard and the Lötschberg on purpose, to be open and frank, because there were alternatives which also were binational. But I would like to stress two things which is relevant explicitly at that moment of time. One thing is that is taking up what Hans-Peter said. There must be a common shared vision that both countries see a benefit, that because that is for the population, this is key. And the other things, that is what Konrad said, you need leading persons who said, this is at least our project. To build a tunnel as such, and explicitly a binational tunnel, is not an administrative act. You need people who are dedicated to say this is the thing we want because it supports this visionary project. If you don't get that, you never get a speed, you never get into gears, and then it will last for decades until things will implemented. I think that is not a Swiss experience, but it's also partly a Swiss experience. But this is key. You need persons who represent the project.
That's a good point. Yeah. Hans-Peter.
I have a technical remark to your question, but I think don't think too much in technical solution, because when you are finished with your project, until Finest will be finished, the technology is replaced in the tunnel. So you have to fix some standards. The gauge and the concrete and the catenary, that's it. That's for a lifetime for around 50 years, I would say, even not the catenary. The concrete and for the slab track and the rail, they have 10 years, concrete 50 years. So if you think too much, you have to change anyway. In the Lötschberg tunnel, as Felix Hamburg told you, we had to change after 7 years the whole tunnel operation center. Because there was the company was bankrupt and there was nothing available.
You just spoiled my next question.
Okay.
But I can add something, maybe that helps you out. What Hans-Peter just said, and this is also making reference to early discussions about economic viability and things like that. If you think that all electromechanical equipment has a lifetime of 15 years, 20 maximum, that has nothing to do with the tunnel. It's just a technical development. So how are you capable in the year 2018, with a construction period of 15 years, to say what at that time will be the top technology to build into the tunnel? Nobody knows it. And if you just think all these Internet of Things and digitalization, nobody, not me, not Konrad, nobody has a clue what in 2030 will be installed in the tunnel. So how can you assume that these days you are capable to make an accurate cost estimation? Just forget it. It's not feasible. It's simply not feasible. And as you said, in the whole lifetime, let's say 100 years of the tunnel, the electromechanical installation will be replaced 4 to 5 times, just due to the technical development of all these installations. Who is driving a car older than 15 years? See? So from that viewpoint, you have to think in other dimensions than just saying we need an accurate figure and say that's it, and if it's like this, we go for it, or we don't go for it. Forget it, it will not work.
I give you only an example. The only thinking we had is how many cable pipes we need, as much as possible. We had no idea how many cables came in the town, but today are all full.
Yeah, good. So my spoiled question is about why only 200 kilometers per hour. Okay, I will not ask that.
Yeah,
I know it will be changed.
I think I'm the right one. In the discussion we had in the advisory board, I always say, I think you have a decision now, or you have seen in a movie, you have a tunnel system with 3 tubes. That was in the Gotthard about 91. We had a big discussion for maybe a little bit more than a year. We two went in the same group there, a little bit younger than today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next step is to go in a deeper step, operation. What's the correct speed? So building a tunnel for 200 is one. Running with 200 is another question. If you have a mixed traffic, as faster you are, as bigger your difference, as more problem you have with your capacity. So I will be open here, and there is a gap between 160 and 200 in the costs. So when we start here, what we have done in the Gotthard with risk management, to take your chance and find your risk, there is a chance to find money, maybe, if you reduce. And the question is, I have seen in the movie, and I heard it before, 30 minutes, that's a goal, that's okay for me. But maybe 45, it's also enough, because I think you don't lose any passenger because the travel time is a little bit longer. But you win maybe some millions.
Yeah. Thank you. Audience, do you have questions? The greatest tunnel experts of Europe are here. Now it's time to ask. Okay, I have one for you. Even in Estonia, when we are discussing Rail Baltica, a lot of environmental issues are raised, a lot. What can you predict? What environmental issues can be raised here with the tunnel project? Felix, maybe you know.
Well, of course, there are several. You may have let's say, environmental impact of a larger scale. I gave a remark in the previous discussion about CO2 footprint, thing like that. So that's an issue. Then, of course, you have, let's say, a smaller scale environmental impact, like, for instance, when you build these artificial islands, then you, of course, have an aquatic habitat around these islands, which you have to preserve. Also, groundwater is an issue, but I'd say all of them are to overcome, because this environmental impact of the tunneling as such is common issue. I mean, there are so many kilometers of tunnel built, so how to handle or how to do tunneling without affecting the groundwater to the least, there is technology available which just needs to be applied. So I'm not so much concerned about that. But one factor I would like to make you aware of when it comes to environmental impact is and that has been in all these big projects an issue, is the excavated material. I'm not sure if I remember correctly, but at the Gotthard Paste Tunnel is roughly 60 kilometers. The volume of excavated material was 5 times the Cheops pyramid. So we are talking of huge amount of excavated material. So how to handle that? I mean, of course, it's once excavated, that's one thing. You need to transport it. Maybe you have to deposit somewhere. Of course, you can reuse it. So the whole material handling in a proper way to make most out of it and not, let's say, transport it back and forth unnecessarily, that is the key element in environmental impact. I know that the Estonians would be more than happy to get some very sound rock for concrete aggregate. I understood you have a shortage in aggregates here, but just dimension-wise, we talk for sure of 6 to 7 pyramids you find in Egypt. So we are talking of millions of cubic meters of excavated material, which must be shipped and treatable. So that is one of the key elements when it comes to environmental issues.
Thank you.
I think in Rail Baltica terms, it's important to accept that there's no such thing as a perfect project. Minister Berner very correctly articulated almost the dilemma between what are climate goals and what are our environmental impacts. And there isn't a project around where this dilemma doesn't exist. For any kind of building of anything, actually. Now, this does not mean that the questions raised on an environmental level in Estonia, and in some other countries for that matter, are not valid. I think we need to find the best way to address these issues and mitigate them. Whether it is about animals moving or what may or may not be impacted in our very pristine forests. But there is a trade-off somewhere. It cannot be 100% perfect. We are looking, we are seeking to develop a project that looks at zero impact railway, which is something that different institutions also in Brussels are looking at and will be working with us to see how we can deliver probably, or hopefully, one of the better projects where sustainability and impact on environment is concerned.
Thank you. From your projects, from your previous projects, how much interest from local citizens or local organizations were towards environmental questions and issues?
Oh, that was very important in the beginning. So we had on the construction side, we had every year at least 2-3 meetings with the local people to inform them what happens, what are we doing as next. And we had also a help phone that was interesting. I think I remember it rings maybe 2 times in the first week, and after them it was 13 years quiet. So you have to give the people something, and they are interested and they want to have information. So they see what happens on the construction side. They heard there is something, there was an accident, and maybe they want to know what happens. Is it danger for us or not? Everything. To be in contact, it was quite important. So, and we had it on all 5 construction sites.
I mean, you know that, or you may know that in Switzerland we have a rather unique way of let's say, communication between the population and agencies and administration and the government. And the early involvement of the people is a key element. And we normally in Switzerland, we try to involve the people living around the future sites, but also the larger population from a very early phase, so that they know what is planned, how will it look like. We make special open days for the population, that they can visit the sites where no work is done. So it is, and the client had an organization doing nothing else than do communication with the people. This is key, because people basically are interested, and if you can receive them in a positive manner, show them in a transparent way what you do, then that is very essential. I mean, there are very famous projects in Germany, Stuttgart 21, which was disastrous because they were just planning in their offices, no communication to the affected people living in that city, and ultimately it created a lot of delays and things like that. So early involvement of the population is key, and that starts with the event today, and that should go on. That should go on.
We had about over 1 million visitors on our construction site, over 1 million. And these visitor days, they had between 3,000 and 5,000. It was a little bit, it depends where they are. But it's very popular, very popular. And then the people understand what happens with their own money, because it's tax money. And you took the concept over.
Yeah, we have approximately 30,000 visitors per year. And we are opening as well the sites once per year, where we have approximately 4,000 people on one day on site, and we are presenting the project till now approximately 50 times per year. So that means every week within the whole project, it is presented once per week.
Yeah.
And we are still doing that. And I remember 10 years ago when I started actually really defending the project, I went out 150 times per year. So I was actually every second, third day out in a small village discussing the project. But the most important issue, based on my opinion, are the following. You have to tell the people, the population, the truth. You have to represent the project as a leadership, saying this is my project, I'm defending that, I'm trying to push it forward. And in order to do that, you need informations, you need data. And therefore, coming back to your original idea, environment, I guess the most important issue would be also for your project to start now, to analyze carefully and to monitor carefully the environment, the different environmental issues. And this creates you an added value. If you are starting to monitor the whole environment in nature from now on, all those results can be taken into projects, school projects, university projects, research projects. This gives you a complete new, let's say, identification with the whole environment. The second issue, Felix was pointing out, reutilizing the excavation material. This is another big issue. Don't drill only some holes and excavate some materials in order to identify the geology, but use it immediately also to develop ideas if that material could be used for the concrete production or for something else. The third issue is mobility. We are going into a new digitalized generation, and this should be now carefully studied also. What is going on in the near future about ships, about CO2 impact vehicles and so on. And if you're doing so, then you are creating some added value. Last issue. Normal structures are planned for 50 years. You should think it a little bit over. I was the first who developed the idea for the Brenner base tunnel that we should have a life cycle of 200 years. Now all the design rules have been modified in order to reach 200 years. And certainly you never know what is going on, but at least you have a very long lifespan, and you are focusing the attention on the quality of the material, of the construction and so on, and you are, let's say, optimizing the cost-benefit ratio.
Yeah, thank you. It's opening the whole different side of a project. Talk to people, educate them. Mm-hmm. We have a question, please. Where is the mic? Okay.
Hello, my name is Kalev Kallemets. I'm Deputy Director of the Geological Survey of Estonia. Regarding the extraction material, we have one quarry within the city limits of Tallinn that is called Väo, and which is a quite large quarry that has been the main source of limestone in the Tallinn for about 50 years. So if this could be backfilled with sedimentary materials, we create tens of hectares of space that is real property value next to the both railway and the main road out of to St. Petersburg. But regarding those artificial islands, one real good prospect that was brought up by Vesterbacka's Finest Bay project was to develop the artificial islands as real estate development projects. Could those both artificial islands in your planning, in your discussions, be developed in a similar manner that the excavated material is really deposed of in the sea, and several hectares of the artificial island that is stable and could be, how to say, livable, that this could be executed?
Thank you. The islands are for people or for gulls and seals? What do you think?
Well, basically, I mean, the ultimate use of these islands has not been defined in that feasibility study. I mean, potentially it's feasible to change the shape and to change the use of these islands in whatever you want. The only thing is that you have, if you go into a kind of, let's say, a resort type of usage with hotels and golf courses and things like that, then you just need the normal infrastructure, which means you need power, you need water, you need sewage treatment. So that comes on top of it, and that but basically it's feasible, of course.
And you can sell it, and you can't sell it to the seals. Huh?
That's right. No, basically that's feasible, but it has not been an issue in this technical feasibility. But the space, the room is open to discuss such usages.
There was another question, please.
I'm Keijo Nenonen from Geological Survey of Finland. So I wonder, what is the seismic durability of the tunnel? So in the lifespan of 200 years of the tunnel, we could expect earthquake something like 3 magnitude, at maximum 6 magnitude to the tunnel area. So how about, and then again the water pressure, so there is a 200 meters water column, so water pressure is quite high in the depth of 200 meters.
Okay, I assume you understand that, let's say, the structural design, let's say, centimeters of thickness of lining in a feasibility study, this is not the key issue. It goes about feasibility. Is it feasible? And yes, what are the key criteria? But it is understood that in a next phase, if there will be a next phase, a preliminary design, the seismic resistance of the tunnel will be part of the structural design. So it will be taken up, and the magnitude of the seismic event, being it 3 or 6 or whatever, will be taken into account. I mean, there are, let's say, areas on that globe which have a much higher seismicity than you have here. And the tunnels there in China and other places, they are designed that they can withstand seismic events. So the technology is there to do that, but it was not a focal topic in the feasibility. Beside that, the experience shows that underground infrastructure are less vulnerable to seismic events than, let's say, above ground structures, which is easily to understand, because if the earth shakes, the tunnel shakes together with the surrounding earth. While if you have a skyscraper and you shake it here, then the whole skyscraper shakes. So the approach is different because the effect is different. From that viewpoint, it will be taken up for sure in the next phase.
Thank you.
For the water pressure, it is not a problem. If you think it over, if you have an overburden of, let's say, 1,000 meters, as we do have in the rock tunnels, we are talking about shell structures. That means you have a lateral homogeneous pressure approximately of 25 bar or something like that. But in real rock conditions, we have localized pressures above that value, much above, and therefore this is certainly not a big deal.
The nice thing for that tunnel when it comes to water pressure, it is a constant water pressure, because you are 200 meters below sea level and you have a constant water pressure. But if you go what you just said in alpine tunnels where you have high overburden, you have, let's say, a cover of maybe 2,000 meters, you have a much higher water pressure and you have a fluctuating water pressure.
A concentrated load, and this is actually what we have to avoid. Yeah.
So it's much easier to handle.
It's a dream to have a homogenized lateral pressure.
Thank you. One question was here.
Yeah.
And this is the last one, I'm sorry.
City of Helsinki again. I first of all want to say I'm totally committed to seeing the tunnel built. I'm all for it. In terms of the panel's collective work experience, how many tunnels have been built on time and within cost? And the reason I ask is the Western Metro in Helsinki unfortunately failed on both accounts. Now it's a big hit, it's wonderful to see, and it's worth all the trouble. However, we have to look at it from a feasibility point of view and ensure that we can at least aim to achieve within cost and timetable. But how realistic is it?
Thank you.
I would like to thank you for the question. This is a very important issue. When I came to this project 20 years ago, I had exactly that topic. Everybody, until now also on a university level, are talking big projects, big infrastructures, mega projects. They are never able to be built within a certain period of time and costs. I'm at the moment writing a book about limiting unknowns. So what have to be done? I mean, first of all, the design have to be done in a very professional way. Secondly, you need from the beginning on to work with some risk management, risk analysis. You have to identify certain risks and opportunities, and you have to add to the costs and to the construction time a certain amount of unknowns. That means if you are on the level of a preliminary study, then you have to add at least 30% in terms of costs dealing with risks, identifiable risks and unknowns. For our specific project, which is a project we built already, we excavated already 1/3 of the total 230 kilometers what we have to excavate, we still have approximately 12% of risk there. So if the cost is 100, then our so-called total costs are 112%. We are doing every 6 months some, let's say, risk identification analysis, and we are trying that all the project coordinators are committed with that. In other terms, in order to summarize the answer, you should do the analysis, the design in a very careful way, starting immediately with identifying certain risks, adding them in terms of time and costs. And if you are able to do that so from the beginning on, then you will end up within a certain small percentage,
Okay.
which is lower than 5%.
Thank you very much. We're now short in time. Thank you very much for being part of this panel. Can we ask for applause?